What's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, hi, my name is Sydney. Every single Thursday I sit down and I talk about the craziest true crime in every single state. So, if you hate America but you love true crime, you should subscribe. Thursday, you know what that means. Another crazy killing, of course. I really like the stories that are more kind of older, I guess. This one's older. Like, it's in kind of, I think this one takes place in the 40s. This was a long time ago, and it's just wild. It's not a serial killer, but it is obviously a killer, and but it's a really interesting story. And I know that you're all probably looking at the title like, a Spider-Man. You'll see. Just wanted to let you guys know that. It's not a crazy graphic one, but it is kind of sad, so obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to warn y'all. So, nothing really new happening, so I will just go ahead and get into the video. This is the Denver Spiderman of Colorado. Alright, so there's going to be a few names, so just kind of bear with me. Philip Peters was born in 1869, and he married a lady named Helen Peters, who was born in 1872. The couple grew up and lived in Denver, Colorado, and they lived in the same cute little brick home for about 40 years. Philip worked at the Denver and Rio Grande Railway for a really long time. He worked there from 1891 to 1930, and he retired there as an auditor. The couple only had one son. His name was Philip Peters Jr., and he grew up and got married and moved off on his own to Grand Junction, Colorado. The couple lived a super sweet little American lifestyle. They were both really into music, and Philip actually played the mandolin. He was a part of their little town's music group and a club, and he would host like super small concerts for the just the town. They just had like a sweet little life. In September of 1941, Helen actually fell and broke her hip, and it was really bad. She was in the hospital for months, and Philip kind of was alone in the house. So, the house kind of felt empty. They had lived in there for about 40 years, and, he got to go and visit Helen every single day, like while Helen was in the hospital. So because he made multiple visits to his wife in the hospital, a lot of the neighbors would go around to his house and they would pick up around and clean up after him, just to help him out, because everybody loved the family and they were just such a sweet couple. They just wanted to help them out while Helen was in the hospital. Sadly though, on October 17th of 1941, Philip was supposed to go to a house party down the street at a neighbor's house that were called like the Ross family. Miss Ross kind of got suspicious because he was kind of late. The dinner party had started, and she was worried about him. He had never missed a dinner party or was never late ever. So because his behavior was not like Philip at all, Miss Ross decided that she was gonna walk down the street because she felt really panicked, and she was gonna go check up and just make sure, like he hadn't fallen or anything. She was just making sure he was okay. But sadly, what comes next was awful. She got there, she knocked on the door, there was no answer, and there was a passing neighbor that was walking, so she asked her if she could come over and help her hop over the fence so she could possibly go through the back door. Miss Ross had explained to the neighbor, that neighbor's name was Doris. She explained to her that she was really worried about Philip, and that's why she was trying to break into his house, and she just wanted to check up on him because I think Doris was also headed to the dinner party too. So she was just like, let's just go check on him, make sure he's good. But she walked into a gruesome scene. There was a blood trail from the kitchen to one of the front bedrooms. There was blood splattered all over the wall. She followed the streaks of blood from the kitchen to the bedroom, and that's where she found Philip laying face first on the freaking ground. There was a pile of blood next to his head, and she just lost it. She immediately called the police, and because the, couple was so well known and so well liked, the police arrived almost immediately. They swept out the house, make sure there was no foul play, like see if anything was stolen, like if this was a break-in, and they just wanted to sweep the place, make sure they could understand what was going on. It was determined that Philip was struck 37 times in the head, and that's what caused his death. There was blood splattered everywhere around him and all over the house. He had bruises like up and down his arms as if he was like protecting himself. So they determined that he was defending himself, he was fighting back, and his walking stick that he had was also broken in half, so he possibly had used used that to either hit him, or it was broken half when he was holding it up or something that he was on the ground defending himself with. So it, just really sad. So while the police were sweeping the house, there was absolutely no clues. There was nothing that showed foul play. There was no signs of break-in entry. There was nothing. The police were like... So when police went into the kitchen, they found a cast iron stove shaker, and they saw that it was kind of out of place, but it didn't look like there was like any blood on it or anything. They just kind of thought it was weird because it was not where it normally would be. But because they just kind of looked at it and they thought it was sketchy, they decided to take it in and use it as the primary murder weapon. So they sent it to the FBI to get like fingerprints and stuff done like that. So while that was being tested just to see if that was their primary murder weapon, they still continued to sweep the house, still didn't find anything. They just kind of thought maybe that was what was used. When investigators inspected the entire house too, they thought maybe it was a robbery, that Philip might have possibly opened up the door because he knew this person. That's why there was no like forced entry into the house. But they found money and valuables everywhere, so they ruled robbery out. So maybe the reason why Philip died was because of a revenge killing. So investigators were like, well, maybe somebody, just wanted to get rid of him. But whenever the neighbors and stuff were asked, they were like, no, this couple had no enemies. They were really well respected, really well liked. So they also ruled out revenge killing. There was no reason why somebody would kill Philip because he had no enemies, that he was really well liked. Investigators decided to bring in about 3 suspects that they thought might have done it, and when questioning, they kind of ruled them out because they weren't good suspects. They just decided there's no way that these people did it. The only reason why they took one of the guys in was because the jacket he was wearing was suspicious. The stove shaker that was sent for the primary weapon, the investigators got it back and it was said that there was no fingerprints on it at all, but there were blood, little speckles and splatters on it. So it was determined that was the murder weapon that was used to kill Philip. It looked like the perpetrator had washed off the fingerprints and the blood and also washed his hands, so whenever he placed it back, that's why there was no fingerprints, but there was some blood speckles at the bottom. Although the investigation was still active, police were absolutely stumped. There was no leads. It was almost as if this was the perfect crime. Helen, who was Philip's wife, returned in February of 1942, so it was a few months after she had fallen and broke her hip. She was in the hospital for a really long time. Of course, she knew about the news about Philip, and it devastated her, and she had to come home to an empty home that she had lived with her husband for 40 years, in the same home that her husband was murdered in. So I couldn't imagine that weight. That is so sad. The house felt empty even though she had 2 nurses that were at her aid. Just to make sure she didn't fall and hurt herself again, she had a day nurse and she also had a night nurse. Not long after being back in the house though, she fell again and broke the other hip, and so she was back into the hospital. This one wasn't as long though. Her recovery after hitting her hip, she was only in there for 2 months, and she returned back in April. And the same 2 nurses that aided her from her first fall aided her for her second one back at the same house. The nurse for the daytime was Edith Clark, and then the nighttime nurse, her name was Hattie Johnson. There were no pictures of them anywhere, so just kind of think about what a 1940 nurse would look like. Edith was the first to discover the sketchy noises in the house. She said that there were just noises in the walls. She swore she could hear footsteps walking all the time. She stated that newspapers that she would watch the paperman drop off on the porch. Yes, that actually happened back then. It doesn't happen now, but she would watch the newsman drop off papers on the porch, and then she would go to pick it up later on that day, and they would be gone. And trays of food that she would leave out for Helen to eat were magically gone, magically disappeared, and she would ask Helen, are you playing a prank on me? Did you eat already? And Helen would be like, no, I haven't ate. I don't know what you're talking about. Hattie, who was the night nurse, said that she also could hear bumps and creaks and stuff like that in the night. So both nurses had been hearing a bunch of noises, and it was really freaky for them. The craziest story is the neighbors, not the Rosses, these neighbors are called the Vosses, they installed a buzzer next to Helen's bed. So this was just like in an emergency, just in case she ever needed anything. It was for the neighbors and for the nurses. It was loud enough for everybody to hear. So the husband, his name was John Voss, he heard the bell ringing and he freaked out and he was panicked. He ran over to her house just to make sure she was okay, and he was gonna run up to the bedroom because her bedroom was upstairs. But when he ran inside, Helen was just sitting in her chair minding her own business, and so she was just as surprised as he was whenever he saw her sitting in the chair. And he was like, "You didn't ring the bell?" She was like, "No, I've been down here the whole time." John knew she wasn't playing a prank on him because of her physical condition. There was no way that she had rang the bell upstairs and traveled downstairs as fast as she could as the same amount of time that John got over to her house. There was no way that she was faster than him, basically, to play the prank on her or on him, for her to play the prank on him. Getting tongue-tied today, I'm sorry. So Helen was kind of hard of hearing, so she never heard any noises, but she heard stories and stuff like that that the nurses would say. And so now this new incident with John rushing over had her freaked the hell out, and she was wondering what was going on. One day, Edith had saw a figure standing in the hallway, and she immediately alerted police, and she said that it was like one of the scariest experiences besides all the noises and stuff. I'm moving my hands a lot, I'm so sorry. Edith told the police that she heard some tapping, but she kind of believed it was the woodpeckers or something like that. So whenever she went upstairs, she decided that she was going to go up slowly, and she saw one of the doors upstairs kind of creak open. She saw a foot step out and a really pale white hand on the doorknob. Whenever she screamed, it made the figure freak out. It closed the door immediately, and she heard footsteps running back, kind of like away from the stairs, like, but up in a way. The police did a full search of the house and they found absolutely nothing. They did a 48-hour camp out outside the house to make sure they didn't see anything after that, and there was still nothing. There was, you know, they thought it was just a story that Edith had made up. Edith resigned from her position by taking care of Helen, and 2 weeks later, Hattie, who was the night nurse, also resigned. She said that she wasn't staying in a haunted house because they were so freaked out by these incidents. Like, they didn't want to stay there anymore. So Philip, who was Helen's son, decided that, you know, his mom could not take care of herself anymore, and now that the nurses are gone, she shouldn't stay at the house by herself, and he persuaded her into moving in the house that him and his wife have in Grand Junction. And Helen was kind of hesitant at first, but she realized, like, that's probably a good idea. Like, I need somebody there to help me out. So she decided to move in with Philip Jr., not Philip that passed away, her husband. So she moved a lot of her stuff out, but she still kept the house. She just cut off the utilities inside the house. But police still went inside the house a few times to maybe find new evidence or more clues for the death of her husband, because that investigation was still going on at the time. Helen had moved out of the house, but neighbors said that they could see, like, the blinds open and close inside the house, and it was changing every single day. They were either open or they were closed, or they would watch them open and watch them close. They were down some days, they were up some days, and it was just really strange because if Helen's gone, no one else lives there. There's been like noises in the house. Is it a ghost? Neighbors said that they could see silhouettes of people walking, and so police were kind of like, okay, let's go check it out. And so when the police went, they couldn't find anything. There was still just nothing but empty rooms. Is it the ghost of Philip? Because this didn't start until Philip died. So of course the press and newspaper articles were showing this as the ghost slayings, as if maybe there was a ghost before Philip who killed Philip, because it was still the perfect crime. He had nobody arrested. Now there's a lot of noises and stuff going on in the house, so this had to have been a ghost. They started referring to the Peters home as the ghost house. On July 30th, 1942, the two detectives that were kind of on the case, Roy Bloxham and William Jackson, they decided that they were going to go on their patrol, that they were just going to stop at the ghost house, see if anything new has happened, but they kind of had a thing in their mind like it's just going to be empty again, like we're just, you know, wasting time. But they decided to go in the house anyways. Whenever they got there, they're searching, they're being quiet, and they heard a very faint noise that sounded like a footstep, like okay? It sounded like a footstep upstairs, so they sprinted upstairs. They were like, maybe somebody's here. Whenever they got upstairs, there was a pair of legs in a panel that was climbing up, and all you could see was from like the knee down. So they ran over and they grabbed the legs and they pulled down a really small, pale man. His clothing was almost completely rotted and was hanging on by like single threads. He had a .44 caliber pistol. I can't talk today. But the detectives said that he didn't even try to shoot them, he was just holding it. So the detectives decided to bring him in for questioning, and as on their way to the police station, he had told them that he was from New York and his name was Matthew Cornish. The detectives, when in questioning, gave him a hamburger, some coffee, an apple pie, and he kind of felt bad because they were being nice to him, and he gave in and he finally explained his true identity. His name was Theodore Edward Coneys, and he talked about the details of his life, how he came into contact with Philip, and then the results leading into his death. Backtracking to November 2nd, 1882 in Petersburg, Illinois. This is when Theodore was born. His father was named Thomas Coneys, and his father was a Canadian immigrant who ran and operated a hardware store, and his mom, Isabella, was a stay-at-home mom and she took care of the kids. In 1888, this was around the time that Theodore was about 6. His father suddenly passed away, and Isabella decided to get up and move them away to Wisconsin. And while they were in Wisconsin, Theodore fell ill with tuberculosis. As he was growing up as a kid, he had multiple like problems. He was really sick all the time, very ill. This poor kid just couldn't catch a break. So Isabella was scared that the only member left of the family, oh, I said kids earlier, he was an only child, I'm sorry. Isabella was scared of losing Theodore right after losing her husband, that she wouldn't let him play any sports or anything, and she forced him to play the mandolin. So he wasn't allowed to play sports, and the doctors actually gave him like just a bleak diagnosis of, hey, you're probably not gonna live past the age of 18 because of how sick and ill and skinny he was. He was so skinny and he couldn't put on any weight because of how sick he was. They were just like, I'm really sorry, but probably by the age of 18, you're not gonna see the light of day. So because of the hardware store, Isabella got all that money from Thomas, and they had a pretty good sum of money. So they moved again from Wisconsin to Denver, Colorado. But she met a con artist who basically conned her out of all of her money that she had, because she was gonna invest in this business that he was talking about. And he took all of her money and ran, and she was left with not a single penny. She took every single ounce of money that she had and invested it into this con artist. So Theodore felt bad, decided to pick up a job, like a little part-time job to just put food on the table. And in 1907, Isabella passed away and left Theodore with no money at all. He was still pretty sick and still really skinny, but he was 25, so doctors fooled him. He was 7 years past the time that he was supposed to die. So like I said earlier, Philip played the mandolin, and so did Theodore. So whenever he was in Denver, he met Philip because they were in the same exact club and they both played the same instrument. So they sat next to each other, played with each other all the time, and they became kind of close, almost as if like Philip was a fatherly figure to him. Philip and Helen saw that Theodore was really struggling after his mother's death, so they just wanted to offer him, you know, a helping hand and just be a friend for him. And they always asked him to come over for dinner. You know, they've just given him such good company. They were such a sweet couple. Theodore's friends helped Theodore get a job as a pipe fitter helper at a gas and electric company. And he actually worked his way up to becoming a pipe fitter himself, so he got his own helper. And him and the helper became really close, and they decided that they were going to start up their own business. So they were going to leave this really great job that he had and start their own business. The business was basically going to be like their own advertising, but they both failed miserably at the job and lost all of their money, and they didn't get their jobs back at the gas and electric company that they had before. From the time that he lost his job to 1941, he was all over many states. He did this over the years and then found himself back in Denver in 1941. It had been 30 years since he had seen Philip and Helen, but he decided because he was a homeless and a beggar that, you know, they were always so kind to him and always offered him a place to stay and some food, that he could go back to their house and maybe they could do the same thing for him. Even though it had been 30 years, he was hoping that they could recognize him, and he was just really desperate, so he kind of felt comfortable asking them over anybody else. In September of 1941, Theodore walked up to the Peters house and he saw Philip and a neighbor leaving the house, so his plan kind of failed, like he was just gonna have to wait it out. But instead of waiting it out, he just decided, I'm just gonna go see if the back door is unlocked and then help myself to some food. Back door did happen to be unlocked. He went inside, he ate some food, and he decided, winter's coming, might as well just set up camp here. Walked around the house to see if maybe there was something that Philip and Helen probably wouldn't find him in, and he found a very, very, very small crawl space in an attic, and he decided, this is where I'm gonna live. And when I say small, this thing was only like 3 feet tall and 4 feet wide. For weeks, Theodore would step out of the attic and go downstairs whenever Philip would leave to go see Helen, because this was around the time that Helen was still in the hospital. And that was whenever he would get out, stretch his legs, go to the bathroom, eat some food, and all that. He didn't really know why Philip was leaving that much. He didn't know anything that had happened to Helen, but he did use this to his advantage. A few more weeks go by. Theodore was kind of getting bored, so he kind of made a game out of following Philip around the house just to see if he could probably get caught, or if he would get caught at all. And so he would follow him, shadow Philip, hide behind walls if Philip would turn, and he just said it just made a game out of it, and it gave him some kind of entertainment for the day instead of just locking himself in an attic. So on Friday, October 17th, the day that Philip passed away, Theodore thought that Philip was leaving again around the same time that he did, but Philip was actually laying on the couch taking a nap, and Theodore came downstairs and decided he was gonna go and help himself to some food. Whenever he was starting to, make some food for himself, Philip was on the couch, woke up because he heard some noises, so he decided to go into the kitchen to investigate. Theodore said he went into full panic mode because he thought that the attic that he was staying in whenever winter was coming was like it was just gonna end. He wasn't gonna have a place to stay anymore. So he grabbed something hanging on the wall, I think it was a revolver, and he smacked Philip against the head with it. Philip crawled and decided that he was gonna crawl to the phone that was in the living room. Theodore followed him with the stove shaker, and as Philip was reaching for the phone, he decided to constantly hit him over and over and over the head. He said that he had put up a good fight and he didn't really want to do it, but it was either me or him. He said that he hit his head so many times he just kept hitting until he just didn't see him move anymore. He washed his hands, cleaned up the murder weapon, put it back on the stove, freaked out, grabbed some food, and then ran back upstairs. Theodore says if it wasn't for Philip catching him in the act in his icebox, that Philip would still be alive. It was either me or him. So he decided to go back to the attic, and that is whenever Miss Ross and them came in and discovered Philip's body. He had made a makeshift radio in the attic upstairs, so he would listen to the stories and stuff of the murder and what he had done. Whenever Helen had cut off the utilities, he said that it really upset him, it really pissed me off because he almost froze to death a lot of the nights. Theodore admitted to staying in the house even when Helen was living there, and whenever Helen left. He stayed there for about 10 months. He decided that he would go and watch Helen sleep in her bed whenever he would get out in the middle of the night to, stretch out his legs and go to the bathroom again and stuff like that. He said that he would get really pissed off looking at the mailman because he hadn't received a letter in 25 years, and that really upset him. Local papers filled out their front headlines calling the ghost slayer living like a spider, is what they would call him, like he was almost like a spider. It was just a really exaggerated story. Theodore told police that the only time he had left the house was one time in 10 months, and it was whenever he was gonna go scoop up some snow and put it in a little bucket, and he was gonna have some water since Helen had cut off the utilities, he didn't have any. And he said that it kind of felt comfort having a place to himself, even though the circumstances were really bad. Despite being 6 feet tall, Theodore was only 75 pounds at the time of his arrest. In his attic, he had an ironing board as a bed, and whenever police went to inspect the attic, they said it smelled so bad, and one police officer actually vomited whenever going into the little crawl space that he lived in. For his trial, Theodore basically said he was not guilty of first-degree murder, and his attorney basically pleaded to not have the death penalty for him. Basically said that the murder was not premeditated because it was just an instant instinct to, you know, kill Philip at that time, and his physical being was just like not that great at the time. I don't really know exactly what that means, but it wasn't his mental state, it was his physical state. The trial lasted about 6 days in October of 1942. It was supposed to happen in September, but it got pushed back because Theodore got pneumonia. So again, still sick even in his 50s. He was in his 50s whenever he killed Philip, but Philip was in his 70s. So oh, that makes me so sad. That does not deserve to that did not deserve to happen to the sweet man. It doesn't happen, it shouldn't happen to anybody, obviously, but just poor little old man. It makes me so sad. Like, I don't even know what to say to that. During his incarceration before he took trial, he had a psych examination done, and basically he was fit to stand trial. On the 7th of October, Foster Klein, who is his defense attorney appealed to the judge basically an independent examination to help his case of not getting the death penalty, and this appeal was accepted. On Halloween of 1942, the jury only had about an hour and a half of deliberation. The jury came up with the verdict that Theodore should be sentenced to life in prison with hard labor in the Colorado State Penitentiary. Theodore was very, very, very happy with this sentence. He told his defense attorney right after they said the verdict that he was really happy. I feel really calm, really at home, like I haven't had a place to stay in years. He said he felt safe, and you know, even though it was life in prison, he had a place to stay, he had a place to live, and that's sad, but also like, it's prison. It took some time for the press to change his name of the Ghost Lair to the Denver Spiderman, because the police stated that the little space that he lived in was fit for a spider. May 16th of 1967, Theodore was 84 years old whenever he passed away, and he was buried just in a little memorial ground next to the penitentiary, and that is the end of it. He served his life in prison, but I think this story has got to be one of the most scariest, because imagine a little creepy man living in your effing attic. And there has been so many cases like that. Like, if you watch YouTube videos, people find people in their attic or like in like their closets and shit all the time. Y'all, I think like that is one of the most scariest things. As I was reading this, I went and I searched every single corner and crevice in my house. I live in an apartment, so we don't have an attic unless they're lying to us, but that's so scary to me, having someone live in your house that you don't know about. What we can take from this is search your house, your attic, your basement, your closets, your vents, anything. I don't even know where else to search, but search it. Search your water tanks. I don't know. I'm gonna finish this before I just keep saying the same thing over and over and over. I tried to do a different story that wasn't so just like hit your gut. Like, obviously this is graphic and it's really sad. Like, the poor man that passed away, he didn't do anything. He had always been nice to him, and that's what's sad. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure you subscribe to my channel and give this thing a like. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload, even though I do post every Thursday. Yeah, share with your friends. I want y'all to comment down below like what you thought of this video, if it really freaked you out, or if this was not something that you were that interested in. Just let me know. I will see you guys next Thursday, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!